Hello Galactic family. Human consciousness is experiencing a great jump in evolution. But I digress. Once on a flight from Australia I was sat next to Scott Tibbetts, entrepreneur and CEO of Katasi Groove. He's also an inventor and a former rocket scientist. He explained that some of his inventions were on the Mars Lunar Rover and the International Space Station. He's a world-class storyteller and we whiled away the in-flight hours sharing stories of our respective work. At the beginning of this epic storytelling flight I told him I thought my job as a practitioner of hypnosis was better than his. In my work I explore human consciousness, which is, to me, an even bigger experience than exploring space. He seemed new to the concepts of my work, so I started with some basic information about the process of quantum healing hypnosis technique. I told him that I guided clients into a very deep state theta to explore the story of their soul. QHHT was created by the late Dolores Cannon, a pioneer of regression hypnosis. Some of you may already know my story with QHHT, but in 2011 I learned about Dolores Cannon. In 2012, I took my first class with her, and by 2013 I was assisting Dolores and her daughter Julia Cannon in classes and assisting other practitioners around the globe, along with having a busy practice of facilitating QHHT sessions at my office in Des Moines, Iowa. I resonated with QHHT because, like with my own channeling technique of TAUK, the art of universal knowing, it demonstrated that all answers are within all of us. As a practitioner of QHHT, I was simply guiding clients to access this infinite source of knowledge and healing. I am now fully enveloped into this world of QHHT. I have seen hundreds and hundreds of clients. I assist and teach QHHT with Julia Cannon. I am the director of the global official QHHT Forum of Practitioners, and I sit on the board of directors for the Future Cannon University. I carry on the work and the peer teachings of the great Dolores Cannon with love and pride. Over the past several years I have noticed an interesting shift in client sessions. I read on our official QHHT forum other practitioners noticing the same curious changes. Human consciousness is experiencing a great jump in evolution. In my work of QHHT I am keenly aware of how people navigate through their consciousness to bypass their analytical left brain and access the infinite knowledge of the right brain. What some refer to as the subconscious, the high self or intuition. It is in this exploration of consciousness and in conversation with the client's high selves that I have discovered that humans are merging the left and right sides of the brain, and in so doing are having profound long-lasting connection to this aspect of their high self. Prior to this merging we would call connections like this an anomaly, an epiphany, or quick and unexpected moments of insight. We all have experienced these moments. During an important conversation with someone we care about, we are at a loss for words. From out of nowhere our mouth seems to open and out comes the most profound and perfect words to help the other person. Sometimes in those moments the one you are speaking to will look surprised and ask you to repeat what you just said. And usually you cannot even remember what you said. But you know what you said was perfect. Where, in that moment of insight, did that thought and those words come from? I will tell you it was from that right side, your high self. In a QHHT session, a client comes in with a list of questions they want their high self to answer. These lists are comprised of health physical questions along with life personal questions. The high self answers from a place of all-knowing and unconditional love. A place beyond the limitations of the left brain. While in hypnosis, The client will visit a time and place in their soul's history. Some would call this a past life, to learn perhaps where an illness originated, or to show the client that they have already mastered a set of skills they need to know going forward in their current life. Once we go beyond that part of the session, the client will access their high self. The high self offers clarity and answers their questions deeply and profoundly, explaining the messages their body is giving as symptoms, illnesses or accidents. Wonderful examples of these sessions are given here and here. Let me explain that when I am speaking to the client's high self, the client is simply speaking the stream of consciousness from the right side of their brain. They are speaking the thoughts from the part of them that knows all and does not work from the concept of fear, like the left brain does. For me, it is like tapping into source knowledge. The great minds over time demonstrate this. People like Einstein, Tesla, Aristotle, Da Vinci, Newton, Mozart, Michelangelo all were masters of accessing this knowledge. In a recent QHHT session, a client's high self said that humans need to think like these great minds. It suggested to imagine, create the changes we wanted, and to place our left brain as the administrative assistant to the creation. The clients I have seen come from all walks of life. Some though are in a position of making great change on this planet. They have included scientists, leaders of global companies, inventors, artists and members of influential families. They have used the knowledge gained by their session to create change for the betterment of humanity. Interviewing the high self. I love to interview the high self. On that long flight from Australia, I told my new friend Scott that I called myself the Katie Couric of the high self. He started to laugh and told me he had just been interviewed by Katie Couric. Oh my! You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, in moments of responding to questions, many high selves have shared very similar information about this merging of the two hemispheres of the human brain. They will say that we are at the end of an experience or experiment of separation. Before the great shift began, we learned from duality. We failed, at times, all alone, not understanding why we were in this body, this life, and this crazy planet. Life has been, for many of us and for much of our lives, a big mystery. But now, the high selves speak of building a bridge between the two sides of the brain so that the client can feel more easily connected to this part of them that knows all. They talk about making decisions from a heart space instead of from the mind only. They speak about additional strands of our DNA being activated. They explain that, in making any decision, primary importance lies in our attention to our feelings. It is through our gut that our high self has had the easiest access before this shift in consciousness began. Dr. Lisa Rankin has a great article about this found here. Over and over again, the high selves say that the clearest way to connect to them is through meditation. One high self recently chatted with me about how excited the community of high selves were for this new way of being on Earth. This high self expressed its notion of expanded selfhood. The high self was the being, equipped with a body. HMMMM. We tend to think of the opposite. The human body has a high self. Or even before that realization, we sometimes understand ourselves as only our human body. In a QHHT session, a client is in this deep state of theta for approximately 2 hours. All of us are in theta at least twice a day. But only for a few seconds or minutes. We are in theta just as we are beginning to wake up and just as we are drifting off to sleep. By having a prolonged experience in theta through a QHHT session, a client can learn to discern the feeling of theta, become metacognizant of the state, and learn how to access it on their own. Once understood, this ability of accessing one's own high self is life-changing. Most interestingly, the merging of the mind has created some changes in how clients experience this deep state of theta. One of my last conversations with Dolores before her passing in October of 2014 was on this very topic. We discussed how clients were reporting feeling somewhat aware during a QHHT session, but would simultaneously still receive deep insight and profound healing of the body. Prior to this change, it was more common for clients to remember very little or nothing after a session. These sessions are audio recorded, so clients have a record of their experience. At first, we practitioners worried that we were not getting the client deep enough when they would report feeling aware or remember the session. We were actually witnessing the jump in human consciousness. Through hundreds of sessions and conversations with the lovely body of high selves, we know that this feeling aware is part of our growth and evolution. One high self related to be that the simultaneous awareness of one's high self, one's past lives, and one's self as in their person and body is normal. She went on to relate that our perception of these manifestations of self as separate is an illusion, and that this separateness was part of the old experiment of not having memory of where we came from before this current life, who our soul truly is, and our own history of our soul experiences. How to bridge the left and right side of the brain. In a QHHT session, I explain this sense of awareness to my client, and I guide them through the process of helping themselves resolve any internal reservations they may have built against trusting information they receive through their stream of consciousness in their right brain. One of the best tips I give my clients is to simply say the very first thing that comes to mind when I ask them a question during hypnosis. Multitudes of high selves will chat with me during the end of a session about how that one tip made all the difference in the client letting go and allowing themselves to voice their high self. They explain that by saying the first thing that comes to mind, you are answering from your high self, which already knows the answer. To analyze, to come up with pros and cons, to rationally think through an answer are all functions of the left brain. Useful when making a to-do list, but sometimes detrimental when trying to access the most intrinsic and profound answers within yourself. I invite you all to try that tip. Perhaps the easiest way is to simply ask yourself a question and record the answer you give yourself. No overthinking or analyzing aloud. Just roll with the very first thought that comes to mind. I think you will be delightfully surprised at what you say. Newer thinking. Imagine that making a wrong decision is an eliminated possibility. Imagine working from a place of compassion, love and understanding. Imagine not working from a place of greed, anger or fear. Imagine life being fun, interesting, and purposeful. People who experience a QHHT session have all the tools they need after a session to continue and strengthen this connection to their high self. This is the way to the future. This is how we operate in the new higher vibrations and frequencies of the new earth. I see this process of tapping into and integration of the high self with our left brain as a way we will create joy and fulfillment much faster and easier in our current time and future. I am very grateful to have a front row in this great jump of human consciousness.